But I want to check out Ben's Wolverine podcast. That sounds super cool. Anything of that era, that sort of wild psychedelia take, especially when they apply it to superhero comics like Grant Morrison's New X-Men. That's my favorite stuff. I love that.
This week sees the release of the third Dawn of X title, Excalibur. Of all the creators in Dawn of X Phase 1, I have the most reservations about writer Tini Howard. Generally speaking, I find her stories laid out well, but poorly paced with awkward dialogue. By all accounts, new X-Men architect Jonathan Hickman requested Howard by name for the project, which adds a layer of credibility to her helming the series. Adding veteran artist Marcus To to the mix is also a good sign. After X-Force artist Joshua Cassara, To is the second best artist associated with Dawn of X Phase 1. Although it's very apparent by the expedited release schedule, he won't be illustrating all of Excalibur. The series also has a compelling cast of characters with Apocalypse, Rogue, and Gambit. I'm a bit surprised Betsy Braddock is the focal point of the book. I like Psylocke as a character, but she doesn't hold the same weight with most readers as Apocalypse. In a recent Dawn of X roundtable, Tini Howard explained Excalibur isn't about tossing Brian Braddock aside so Betsy can take his place as Captain Britain. It's very much a Braddock family story. And that's exactly what a large portion of this debut comic is devoted to. I can say this is easily the best comic I've ever read from Tini Howard, although she still has issues with pacing. There's also a couple of odd character moments that stand out for the wrong reasons, but overall, this is a good start to Excalibur, and I recommend this comic. But readers unfamiliar with the history of Excalibur or the Braddock family are likely going to be left feeling a bit confused. Before I get into all the magical details of Tini Howard's newest entry into Dawn of X, I ask if you haven't subscribed to Thinking Critical yet, please show your support and subscribe to the channel. Let your fellow comic readers know Thinking Critical is a valuable source for comic book reviews, news, discussion, and in-depth analysis. If you're enjoying the channel content, please subscribe. Now let's get into all the details in today's comic book review. So the art from Marcus To is actually really good. I'll give the team behind X-Men this. So far, all the books have a similar visual feel. I don't think any of the Dawn of X artists have quite reached the level of Pepe Larraz and Marte Gracia on House of X yet, but they're getting there. Marcus To's line art is very clean. He places a much greater emphasis on the characters rather than background details. To's characters are very expressive. There are many moments of subtext provided through facial expressions and body language rather than dialogue. That's an enormous value add to writer Tini Howard. The story basically takes place in three distinct settings: Otherworld, the Braddock family estate, and Krakoa. The Otherworld is an alternate plane of existence at war. Camelot is covered in shadow and has a very dreary feel compared to the rest of the settings. In my opinion, color artist Eric Arciniega is probably the creative hero of the team in this issue. He does a great job providing distinct tone with his varied color palette. The Braddock family setting has a much less spectacular feel to it. Everything looks and feels familiar to everyday life. When Betsy finally arrives in Krakoa, the colors are very vibrant. It feels like she's arrived in utopia, and that's certainly by design. If I do have one complaint, the coloring in Krakoa feels a bit oversaturated. One final point about Eric Arciniega's color work: whenever magic or mutant powers are wielded, the pages light up with color and grandeur. It makes the use of magic and mutant powers feel more special. I haven't really noticed this in other X-Men books so far, and I really like it. I want to make one final point about Marcus To's pencils and inking. It always feels like his cast are in motion. Even when characters are providing exposition, they're always doing something. Nothing about this comic feels static. Marcus To and Eric Arciniega do a great job bringing Excalibur to life. There are a few minor issues here and there, but overall they make life very easy for Tini Howard in this story. I rate the art 4 out of 5 overall. The comic starts out in the Otherworld, aka Camelot. King Arthur is missing. In his stead, Morgan Le Fay rules his kingdom. And everything is basically in chaos. Camelot is under siege, and Queen Morgan Le Fay's scrying pool is suddenly filled with flowers. It's never expressly stated, but my assumption is the plants in the Avalon waters are affecting her abilities to wield magic. Later in the story, High Priestess Mariana Stern of the Coven Solar Blackwood performs a seance, and Morgan Le Fay and her commander arrive. Le Fay states that those who draw magic from Avalon will no longer have access as long as weeds pollute her kingdom. Stern recognizes the plants as Krakoan origin. Morgan Le Fay orders them to destroy the portal bringing the plague to Camelot. Until then, no mortals can wield the powers of Avalon. This is a really good setup for the initial villains in the story. In Camelot, Morgan Le Fay has seized control of the kingdom and means to destroy the new portal to Krakoa. On Earth, the High Priestess moves to destroy the portal from Krakoa itself. And there's actually an epilogue that gives even more details on her plan that is very interesting. At the Braddock Academy, Betsy prepares to leave her life in England and move to Krakoa with her mutant comrades. There's a lot beneath the surface between Betsy and Brian. It's one of the shortcomings of the writing here. It's clear the Braddock family have been through some rough times lately. I'm personally not all that familiar with Captain Britain or Excalibur, so I know I would have appreciated a bit more backstory here. Writer Tini Howard uses the white pages in this issue for poetry. I really think a recap of the Braddock family history pertaining to this story would have been a far more effective use of those pages. There's also a bit of dialogue from Brian during their goodbye I didn't care much for. I'm glad you came home. As my twin, you were my first roommate, and I still think you're a fine one. I don't think twins or any other siblings really talk like that. It just read really awkward to me. There's also a good bit of foreshadowing here. They mention Krakoa may be like Ibiza, and Betsy says she wishes their brother Jamie could have seen it, and thinks maybe Krakoa could have kept him on the straight and narrow. It's clear from this exchange Jamie is no longer with us, and is a bit of a party animal. Krakoa is having some very profound changes on some of the mutant inhabitants. In Marauders, Kitty Pryde wants to be called Kate now, and now in Excalibur, Betsy no longer wishes to be called Psylocke. Apocalypse is now going by a Krakoan name, and Goldballs now wants to be called Egg. It's clear the promise of Krakoa and a new life is inspiring mutants to leave the past behind them and move forward to a brighter future. And this is manifesting itself in changing the names they use in the old world. This is really good symbolism, shedding the burden of past lives filled with persecution and fear, and being reborn from a certain point of view with a new sense of pride and community. I hope they don't overdo it with the name changes, but it's really effective. We finally get a feel for Apocalypse's thoughts on this new mutant culture when Sage approaches him. The festivities fascinate me, our people celebrating our homecoming for the first time ever. For centuries, we ran as though we were hunted, and now we are dancing. The children that come of tonight's unions will be the most powerful generation of mutants the world has ever seen. It's interesting to finally hear what Apocalypse thinks about all this, but it's the final sentence that really resonates here. The third law of Krakoa is, make more mutants. This is the first of two references to the third law. Rogue makes the second. It's clear the citizens of Krakoa are taking this very seriously. They are reincarnating fallen mutants. They're forming unions to produce new, more powerful mutants the old-fashioned way. You can tell this idea has taken deep roots in the new mutant community. Sage and Apocalypse visit the Krakoan portal to Camelot. It's not really explained how a Krakoan gate could portal to another realm, but Apocalypse makes it clear mutant expansion isn't stopping with Earth. They've already settled on the moon, and they will make homes in other realms. But the Otherworld are blocking the portal, and they need a champion to break through. This next scene is the one that I really take issue with. Goldballs, who now wants to be called Egg, and if I'm being honest, unless you're a Targaryen, I'm probably not calling a dude Egg. Goldballs has an issue at the hatchery he needs Betsy's help with. When she arrives, her brother Jamie is resurrected. He's drinking a brandy or a wine, and her reaction is all kinds of off. This is her dead brother reborn. I can't imagine losing a brother or sister and the pain that would cause. But I know, unless he's a serial rapist or murderer, this is not how any decent person or mutant would react. Seeing her dead brother return to her, she's repulsed because what? He's back to drinking already? There's obviously a ton of history I'm not familiar with between the two, but it makes Betsy look and feel like a bad person. More so than it makes Jamie look incorrigible, at least to me. How about a hug and an I love you before she chastises and rejects her newly returned brother? This is a really bad character moment in my mind. Unless Howard wants me to think Betsy is a terrible person, then it was spot on. She returns to England to tell Brian their brother has returned and retrieve his amulet to open the portal to Camelot. When she arrives, Captain Britain has been called to return to the Otherworld. She quickly realizes he's being called into a trap. There's a very insightful line from Betsy here before the two travel to Camelot together. I don't want to spend the evening dodging the woman whose life I stole or facing the things I've done wearing her skin. It's clear her time as Psylocke is over. She wants no part of that persona or the burden of that past. It's a really effective line. Captain Britain and Betsy battle Morgan Le Fay and her coven, and I don't want to get too into the weeds here. The most interesting part is Le Fay calling them Witch Breed and the Oathbreaker. You are a tale to be told, one born of good, of light and truth, a champion, and the other, a sinister thing, a thief of lies, who works in the shadows with wild powers, not witch, but witch breed. While this is all going on, Apocalypse has Rogue use her powers to weaken the Krakoan portal to Avalon. I thought Rogue's mutant ability to absorb powers only worked on people and mutants. Why would she be able to absorb the power from the portal? I don't really get it. If you have an explanation, please let me know in the comments. Betsy retrieves the amulet from Captain Britain and returns to the portal, now Captain Britain herself. And Rogue has been possessed by something that escaped the Otherworld through the portal. And she's basically Sleeping Beauty now, I guess. Kind of a weird ending. I'm not really sure what's wrong with Rogue, but then again, neither do the characters. Writer Tini Howard is very effective at fleshing out the current state of the Braddock family characters and Apocalypse to a slightly lesser degree. But Gambit and Rogue feel like they're just thrown in here. It's not clear why they were in the story, other than Rogue being possessed at the end. The scene with Betsy and Jamie fell off to me. I rate the characterization 3 out of 5. The plot is much more successful. Howard's Excalibur feels a bit distant from the other Dawn of X titles so far, but she created several mysteries and obstacles that need to be cleared. I rate the plot 4 out of 5. Before I finish, I want to tell you about Thinking Critical's coffee page. We are just over 20% towards our $240 funding goal for January's audio and video editing software fees. We have a lot of plans for new programming and growth in the future. If you would like to help support the channel and keep the content flowing, all you need is a PayPal account to make a contribution to Thinking Critical YouTube's coffee page. Supporters receive bonus content, early access to some channel content, and exclusive access via our Discord server. There is a link to Thinking Critical's Discord and our coffee page in the video description. I was apprehensive when Tini Howard was announced as the writer for Excalibur. She's assuaged most of those concerns here. This is a well-written comic book that I personally enjoy. There are some issues with pacing and characterization, but for the most part, this is a fun read. I think I would enjoy it a lot more if I were more familiar with Captain Britain and Excalibur. The art from Marcus Toe and color artist Eric Arciniega is the highlight of the story for me. Very well executed on both of their parts. I rate Excalibur number 1, 3.5 out of 5 overall. I recommend this comic. Most readers invested in Jonathan Hickman's X-Men reboot will likely find this comic enjoyable. I don't think this is a good jumping on point, unless readers are up to speed on the Braddock family. Thank you so much for joining me today, and be on the lookout for tomorrow's review of The Last God and Geekspan with my boy Skip.